So you know that moment of calm when you look at a system dashboard, maybe this is your car or maybe a server monitor, and everything is just green.
Oh, yeah. The gauges are perfectly centered.
Right. The status reads normal.
Yeah.
It just feels like safety, you know.
It feels like safety. But in high reliability engineering, that green light is often just a lagging indicator. It is what we actually call the green dashboard syndrome.
Because green usually just means, well, I haven't failed yet.
Exactly. It means the system is currently operating within its defined tolerances. But deep down, I mean, in the actual physics of the silicon or the copper wiring margin is burning away.
And the sources call this silent drift, right?
Yeah, silent drift. It is this invisible accumulation of thermal stress and signal jitter and physical degradation. And it all happens while the light is still glowing green right before it turns red and the whole thing crashes.
And once it turns red, it's usually way too late to do anything but call a tow truck or, I don't know, frantically reboot a server. So today's deep dive is really about how we catch that drift before the crash.
And we have two incredibly distinct sources today that tackle this exact problem, but from totally opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it is a wild pairing. On the microscale, we are looking at a master's thesis from Chalmers University by Leona. And it is hyper-specific. It focuses entirely on video link diagnostics in modern cars.
Right. And then on the macro scale, we have the XR series architecture specification by Dennis T.Y. Leo. This one zooms way out. It moves away from a single copper wire and looks at global cloud infrastructure.
It is almost a philosophical framework for how we keep modern civilization running.
It really is. But despite that massive difference in scale, they are both solving the exact same fundamental problem. How do we move from a binary diagnostic of is it broken to a predictive diagnostic of is it drifting?
Let us start with the car. So Letone's thesis focuses on something called Surrey's video links. And for anyone listening who isn't deep in automotive engineering, we are not talking about checking your oil or tire pressure here.
No, definitely not. We are talking about the car as a moving server rack. Modern vehicles are just packed with ADARs, advanced driver assistance systems.
So that is your LiDAR and radar.
Exactly. Plus, multiple 4K cameras all streaming massive amounts of data to a central computer. And that computer has to make split-second life-or-death driving decisions.
And that data transfer is where the SerDes thing comes in.
Right. SerDes stands for serializer, deserializer. Think of it as a fix for a really complicated plumbing problem. You have a 4K camera capturing a huge parallel stream of data. Millions of pixels, color, data, brightness, all at once.
And you cannot exactly run 50 separate wires for one camera through the door hinge and into the dashboard.
Right, it is way too heavy and honestly way too expensive.
So the serializer basically takes that wide stream and crushes it down into a single funnel.
Into a single, incredibly fast serial stream. It shoots all that data down a simple twisted pair of copper wires, and then the deserializer at the other end catches it and unpacks back into the full picture.
But wait. You're pushing gigabits of data down a simple copper twisted pair inside a moving car. That seems highly optimistic.
It is efficient, but it is very fragile. A car is an incredibly hostile environment for high-speed electronics. You have extreme temperature swings, violent vibrations, and the really big enemy that Letonen focuses on, which is EMI.
Electromagnetic interference.
Exactly.
The thesis had this amazing analogy for this. It describes sending the signal as trying to whisper a Shakespearean sonnet across a room while a heavy metal band is playing right next to your head.
That is the perfect way to visualize it. The whisper is your video feed. It is the raw data that stops your car from backing over a bicycle. And the heavy metal band is the interference from the alternator, the spark plugs, or the massive electric motors if it is an EV.
So, in a standard system, if the band gets too loud, you just lose the signal entirely. The screen goes black, total link loss.
And that right there is the binary failure. You have green light, green light, green light, and then black screen. And if you are doing 70 on the highway and that camera is feeding your lane keep assist Alicia, a black screen is an absolute disaster.
Which is Letonen's whole argument. We need to know when the band is getting louder way before we actually stop hearing the whisper.
So he developed what he calls SIVIS, Simon's video interference check.
But what is SIVIC actually measuring? Because normally if the video image looks fine, the system says it is fine.
SIVIC goes deeper than the pixels on the screen. It looks at the raw electrical signal itself using something called an eye diagram.
Yeah, I saw those charts in the paper. Honestly, it looks like a really chaotic, glowing drawing of a human eye.
It is a visualization of the digital pulses. So basically you stack all the ones and zeros on top of each other on an oscilloscope. Ideally, a 1 is a high voltage and a 0 is a low voltage, and there is this big, wide-open space right in the middle.
And that space is the pupil of the eye.
Right. A wide-open eye means the computer can easily and clearly tell the difference between a 1 and a 0.
But when the interference kicks in, when the heavy metal band starts playing, what happens to the eye?
The signal gets really messy, the highs start to dip, and the lows jump up. All that electrical noise starts encroaching on the open space in the middle. The eye literally starts to squint.
Yeah. So CVIC actually measures the squint.
Precisely. It measures the height and width of that open pupil. So it allows the system to look at a perfect video feed and say, well, the video is flawless right now, but our electrical safety margin has dropped by 40%.
It quantifies the invisible risk?
Yes, it turns an invisible physical degradation into a trackable metric.
But there is a pretty major catch mentioned in the text. Running that kind of deep analysis, actually building and analyzing those eye diagrams in real time, that eats up a ton of computing power.
It does.
And the car's ECU is already redlining, just trying to physically drive the car and process the radar.
That is the big constraint. You absolutely cannot pause the lane keep assist for 2 seconds just to run a diagnostic on the wire. So Leona proposes a really clever workaround called the shutdown module.
I love this part. He essentially waits until the car is completely off.
Exactly. As soon as you park the car in your garage and kill the engine, the car is dead to you. But that is exactly when CVIC wakes up. It hijacks the video link. Since the camera doesn't need to actually record your dark garage, CVIC blasts a stress test down the wire.
The paper calls it a PRBS test, a pseudo-random bit sequence.
Yes.
The text compared this to flushing plumbing pipes with high-pressure water to find leaks. But mechanically speaking, how does sending random static help you find a tiny fault in the wire?
Well, the key word is pseudo-random. To a human observer looking at the data, it just looks like pure static noise. But it is actually a highly deterministic mathematical pattern.
Oh, I see. So the receiver computer knows exactly what sequence of static is supposed to be coming next.
Exactly. It knows every single bit. So if even a single bit is flipped by interference, say a 0 turns into a 1, the receiver catches it instantly. It is a mathematically perfect stress test. CVIC runs this sequence, counts every single error, and then builds a trend line.
And that is the massive shift to predictive maintenance.
Right. It might see that on Monday, the error rate was 0%. On Tuesday, it was 0.01%. On Wednesday, 0.02%.
And to a normal binary dashboard, those are all still perfectly green lights.
But CVIC sees the slope, it sees the trajectory toward a failure, and it flags the car for service weeks before the camera actually drops a single frame of real video.
It essentially solves the processing problem by taking the system offline to test it. But that actually brings us right to the fundamental limit of the automotive model. You can park a car in a garage. You cannot park the internet.
You really cannot, and that is where we bridge over to the macro scale. Cloud infrastructure, banking systems, global communications grids, they never sleep. You simply cannot run a shutdown module on the backbone of the global economy.
Which is where Dennis T.Y. Leo's XR series architecture comes in. And it is interesting because he uses a very similar metaphor to betonin. He calls it the iceberg.
It is the exact same concept of silent drift, just scaled up. The visible system outages, the servers actually going down, those are just the tiny tip of the iceberg. But beneath the waterline is this massive hidden bulk of margin decay and firmware divergence.
But Leo identifies a much deeper, almost philosophical issue in trying to measure this cloud scale drift. He calls it the measurement problem.
Yes. What defines the reference? That is the core question.
Right. If you are measuring a drifting clock by checking it against another clock that is also drifting at the same speed, you're going to think time is completely normal.
He calls that coordinated drift. If your temperature sensors and your servers and your dashboard monitoring tools are all aging and degrading together, the dashboard will happily stay green until the entire data center suddenly goes dark.
Because they are all lying to each other.
Exactly. So you need an anchor. You need a ruler that cannot physically shrink, something that exists completely outside of the software stack.
And that is layer 0 of the XR architecture, what he calls physical truth. Leo argues that you can never trust an operating system to report honestly on its own health. You have to measure the little physics of the silicon.
The spec specifically mentions measuring the band gap reference voltage.
Now, I know that sounds like total Star Trek technobabble to a lot of people. Why is band gap reference voltage the specific metric he cares about?
Because it is entirely based on the atomic structure of the material itself. The band gap is the literal energy difference between the valence band of electrons and the conduction band in a silicon crystal.
So it is hard physics.
Is quantum mechanics. That energy gap is defined by the laws of physics. It cannot be altered by a software bug or a memory leak.
So if that voltage reading starts to drift, it is not a glitch. The physical matter of the microchip is actually degrading.
It is an immutable anchor of truth. And once you establish that absolute truth at layer 0, you can move up to layer 1, which is causal reconstruction. This layer is all about distinguishing between mere correlation and actual causation.
The solar inverter example in the text really clarified this layer for me. So the text outlines a scenario where an inverter in a massive solar farm starts running 0.5 degrees Celsius hotter than usual.
Right. And to a standard cloud monitoring tool that is just statistical noise, half a degree is well within the green safe zone.
But the XR system looks at the full physical context.
It sees that the total power output of the inverter hasn't increased at all. The internal cooling fan speed is exactly the same, the ambient weather outside hasn't changed, so the laws of physics dictate that the internal heat should be perfectly stable.
But it is rising.
Exactly. And that excess heat energy has to be coming from somewhere.
So the system actually deduces the root cause mechanically.
It deduces that the thermal interface material, the actual thermal paste sandwiched between the processing chip and the heatsink, is slowly drying out. It identifies the exact physical mechanism of failure, potentially 2 whole years before the component actually overheats and dies.
That is incredible. But implementing this requires the system to be incredibly rigid about its internal rules. Layer 3 is called Exynos, and it is described as the boundary governor. Honestly, reading the spec, it sounds like a very strict parent.
It has to be strict to survive. Exynos exists to prevent something called responsibility drift. In really complex systems, components will naturally try to compensate for each other to keep things running smoothly.
Like if a database slows down, the web server might automatically decide to just wait a little longer for the data.
Or if a network connection gets jittery, the application software will just silently retry the connection more often.
Basically, everyone is just trying to be helpful to keep the user experience from breaking.
But that helpfulness is actually toxic. It masks the underlying drift. The web server covering for the database means the dashboard stays green while the database is actively dying. So Exynos acts like an unforgiving referee. It issues what the architecture calls yellow cards.
Like a formal warning that you stepped out of line.
Exactly. Take SSD tail latency as an example. If a solid-state drive starts responding just 0.01 milliseconds slower on its absolute worst requests, a human user would never ever notice that.
But Exynos sees it.
Exynos sees that the drive is pushing against its strictly defined mathematical boundary. It flags it instantly, not as a system outage, but as a fundamental breach of contract between the components.
That stops the components from covering for each other's mistakes. Okay, the part of the XR architecture that really completely changes the game for me is layer 5, vector economics.
This is where we completely leave traditional engineering behind and enter behavioral economics. Because historically, reliability is always viewed as a cost center. You just spend money on maintenance to prevent bad things from happening.
It feels like paying for insurance. It is dead money until something breaks.
But Leo flips that entire paradigm on its head. He wants to turn reliability into a value creation engine using tokenization.
Now, before you roll your eyes at the word tokenization, we're not talking about cryptocurrency here, right? We were talking about internal accounting.
Yes, think of it as a highly dynamic internal service level agreement, or SLA. In a traditional corporate model, if a vendor sells you a bad batch of R drives, you only get compensated if those drives completely crash and take down your business. Then you sue them for damages. It is entirely reactive.
But in the XR model, those Exynos yellow cards actually have a real-time price tag attached to them.
Exactly. If a specific component starts to drift, if it creates unexplained heat or adds latency that pushes the system out of its ideal baseline state, the vendor who supplied it is financially penalized in real time. They literally lose tokens of value.
It's like an automated microfine for drifting.
It is, but the flip side of that equation is where it gets genuinely revolutionary. If the system detects and fixes drift proactively.
It actually captures the avoided loss. Like if Exynos predicts a massive failure is coming and proactively reroutes the global traffic to preserve perfect uptime, that action itself has massive economic value.
The architecture effectively mints the value of the disaster that did not happen. It turns stability into an asset you can track.
It completely gamifies system stability.
Because it forcibly aligns the incentives. Leo writes in the spec that incentives are the only non-bypassable governance. Think about it. A human operator can easily ignore a yellow warning light on a dashboard, but a vendor cannot ignore a system that is actively draining their bank account every millisecond they remain out of spec.
By attaching a real financial cost to the invisible drift, rather than waiting for the catastrophic crash, you force every single layer of the supply chain to suddenly care deeply about that 0.5-degree temperature rise.
That is the genius of it.
So bringing Simon Letonin and Dennis Leo together here, we have the car using Civic to silently check the health of its copper wires while it sleeps in the garage. And we have the global cloud using XR to violently anchor itself in quantum physics and token economics while it is wide awake.
They are both fighting the exact same enemy. They are fighting the very human assumption that status normal actually means healthy.
There was a really striking graph in the XR's source document that I think perfectly summarizes the absolute urgency of all this. It is called the risk delta.
Oh, that graph is genuinely terrifying if you work anywhere in operations. Picture two lines on a chart. Line A represents system complexity, and that line is rocketing upward exponentially. We are currently building global systems composed of billions of microdependencies, AI-generated code, and nested multi-cloud layers.
No single human mind can actually understand the whole picture anymore.
Not even close. And then you have line B, which represents human cognitive capacity, or our manual debugging speed.
Which is completely flat.
It is entirely flat. We are not getting any smarter or faster at manually debugging server code. We process complex information at the exact same speed we did 50 years ago.
So the rapidly expanding gap between those two lines.
That gap is the risk delta. As technical complexity explodes, our human ability to manually manage it is essentially collapsing. If we continue to rely on human beings sitting in a control room staring at green dashboards to catch these problems, we will inevitably fail. The gap is simply too wide now.
So the architecture itself has to govern itself. The car has to mathematically know that its digital eye is squinting. The cloud server has to know that its thermal paste is drying out.
We have to automate the reliability from the atomic layer up because we're currently building machines that we are essentially too slow to operate safely.
I think that is the ultimate takeaway here. Reliability is the hidden architecture beneath literally everything else we value. So here's a final provocation for you listening right now. Take a hard look at your own domain.
It definitely doesn't have to be a multi-cloud server cluster or a self-driving car. It could be your department's workflow, your manufacturing line, or honestly, even just the daily habits in your personal life.
What is glowing perfectly green on your dashboard right now? What are you assuming is entirely safe and stable just because it hasn't completely broken down yet?
Where's the silent drift happening in your blind spot? You need to find that squinting eye before the blindness actually sets in.
Dennis Leo and Simon Letonin, thank you both for the serious wake-up call, and thank you all for taking this journey with us.
Stay safe and stay curious out there.
We will catch you on the next deep dive.